For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the evening of June 12, 1993, 19-year-old twins Jessica Kelly and Lauren Edwards were conducting research at England's most mysterious monument. The Oxford archaeology students had special permission to document the ancient stones of Stonehenge after sunset. They never returned to their dormitory. Despite an exhaustive search across the windswept Salisbury Plain and one of the largest missing persons investigations in Wiltshire's history, the sisters seem to have vanished into the same prehistoric mists that shroud the monument's origins. For 25 years, two families lived with the crushing weight of uncertainty, while the silent stones kept their secret. Then, in the summer of 2018, a construction project near the ancient circle uncovered evidence that would finally reveal the dark truth about what happened that night at Stonehenge. This is the complete investigation into the disappearance of the Kelly Edwards twins. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. In the summer of 1993, the ancient stones of Stonehenge stood as they had for millennia, silent sentinels on the Salisbury Plain. For most visitors, the prehistoric monument represented a brief stop on their tourism circuit, but for 19-year-old twins Jessica Kelly and Lauren Edwards, it was the culmination of their academic dreams. The Oxford University archaeology students had earned coveted positions in an exclusive summer research program, joining a select group of scholars permitted to study the monument beyond the standard tourist barriers. The twins had always been inseparable, from their matching copper-colored hair to their shared passion for British prehistory. Their acceptance into Oxford's prestigious archaeology program had been a joint triumph, and their selection for the Stonehenge research project seemed to confirm their promising academic trajectory. Professor Margaret Wilson, who had championed their participation, would later recall their infectious enthusiasm during the project's initial briefing. On the evening of July 8, 1993, Jessica and Lauren began what should have been a routine after-hours research session. The summer sun was setting over the Salisbury Plain, casting long shadows between the ancient megaliths. The twins had specific permission to document wear patterns on the bluestone circles, a task requiring the site's closure to public visitors. Security logs show they checked in at 7:45 p.m., carrying their usual equipment: cameras, measuring devices, notebooks, and an emergency radio. The standard protocol required check-ins every hour, which they completed faithfully at 8:45 p.m. and 9:45 p.m. Their last radio transmission was notably ordinary Lauren's voice, simply confirming their location in the inner circle, with Jessica heard in the background discussing lighting angles. At 10:45 p.m., when the next check-in was due, there was only silence. Site supervisor Malcolm Green initially assumed it was a radio malfunction, a common enough occurrence around the ancient stones. After 15 minutes without contact, he dispatched security officer David Parker to verify their location. Parker would later describe the scene that greeted him as deeply unsettling. The twins' equipment lay scattered among the stones, a camera tripod still standing, a notebook open to a half-finished page, two water bottles nearly full. Their jackets were draped over a fallen stone, suggesting they hadn't planned to leave. Most troubling was the emergency radio, still functioning, sitting atop their research bag. But of Jessica and Lauren themselves, there was no trace. The following 24 hours unleashed a massive search operation across the Salisbury Plain. Inspector Helen Morrison of the Wiltshire Police arrived within the hour, immediately recognizing the unusual nature of the disappearance. The perimeter fence showed no signs of breach, and security cameras had captured no unauthorized vehicles. The twins seemed to have vanished into the gathering darkness between the ancient stones. As dawn broke over Stonehenge, dozens of police officers and volunteers combed the surrounding fields and woods. Helicopter searches revealed nothing in the vast expanse of Salisbury Plain. The twins' parents, arriving from Oxford in the early morning hours, watched helplessly as the search expanded but yielded no clues. The disappearance defied logical explanation. Two educated young women, familiar with the site's safety protocols, had somehow vanished without activating their emergency procedures. Their academic colleagues noted that both were methodical researchers, unlikely to abandon their work or equipment. Professor Wilson, reviewing their notes from that evening, found their observations clear and focused until they abruptly ended mid-sentence. As the first day of searching drew to a close, the ancient stones offered no answers. The twins' disappearance would launch one of Wiltshire's most puzzling investigations, leaving investigators to grapple with a modern mystery in the shadow of prehistoric monuments. No one could have predicted that the truth would remain buried for 25 years, or that the answer would shake the very foundations of Stonehenge's modern guardianship. Inspector Helen Morrison had investigated dozens of missing persons cases in her career with the Wiltshire Police, but the disappearance of the Kelly-Edwards twins immediately struck her as unique. Standing in the weak morning light at Stonehenge, she methodically examined the abandoned research equipment, noting the precise way it had been arranged, not scattered in panic, but placed with deliberate care. The twins' notebook entries from that final evening revealed thorough, academically minded observations about the bluestone circles. Their last written words, cut off mid-sentence, discussed an unusual pattern of tool marks they had discovered on the stone's lower surfaces. Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that this detail somehow mattered. Professor Margaret Wilson arrived from Oxford that morning, bringing with her the twins' complete academic records and research proposals. Jessica and Lauren were exceptional students, she explained, her voice tight with concern. They approached their work with remarkable precision. The idea that they would simply wander off is inconceivable. She provided Morrison with their previous week's research notes, revealing a clear pattern of methodical documentation and strict adherence to security protocols. David Parker, the head of Stonehenge Security, walked Morrison through the site's extensive safety measures. Every access point was monitored, every visit logged, and all after-hours research required multiple layers of authorization. The twins had followed every procedure perfectly until their final check-in. Parker's security logs showed no other authorized personnel on site except for Supervisor Malcolm Green, who had been in the security office throughout the evening. Morrison's team conducted their first interview with Green in the early afternoon. He appeared genuinely distressed, describing how he had dispatched Parker to check on the missed radio call. They were model researchers, he insisted, always professional, always following protocols. Yet when Morrison pressed him about any unusual occurrences in the preceding days, his responses became notably vague. The search of the Salisbury Plain continued as forensics teams examined every inch of the monument. They found no signs of struggle, no blood, no drag marks across the grass. The twins' fingerprints were fresh on their equipment, and partial footprints matched their hiking boots, leading in several directions around the stone circle, but never showing a clear path of departure. Back at Oxford, Morrison interviewed the twins' classmates and professors. A consistent picture emerged of two brilliant students who shared an almost uncanny ability to notice archaeological details others missed. Several mentioned their recent excitement about new findings at Stonehenge, though none could specify exactly what the twins had discovered. The investigation's first week produced more questions than answers. The twins' bank accounts remained untouched, their passports were still in their dormitory, and their cell phones found with their equipment showed no suspicious calls or messages. Every typical indicator of foul play or voluntary disappearance was absent, leaving Morrison with a growing sense of unease. Professor Wilson provided another crucial detail. The twins had recently requested access to historical documents about Stonehenge's modern management, dating back several decades. They had seemed particularly interested in after-hours site access policies, though they never explained why to their advisor. As leads dwindled, Morais N kept returning to the stone circle, studying the twins' final movements. She interviewed Malcolm Green several more times, noting how he became increasingly defensive about questions regarding site access and security protocols. Yet without concrete evidence of wrongdoing, she could not justify her growing suspicions about the site supervisor. The case's first month ended with a devastating realization. Despite the most extensive search in Wiltshire police history, despite hundreds of interviews and thousands of man-hours, they were no closer to finding Jessica and Lauren than on that first morning. The ancient stones held their secret and would continue to do so for 25 more years. As autumn descended on Salisbury Plain, the search for Jessica and Lauren Edwards gradually diminished. Police vehicles no longer circled the perimeter of Stonehenge daily, and the media crews that had once crowded the visitor center dwindled to occasional reporters seeking anniversary updates. The case that had captivated Britain's archaeological community settled into the painful rhythm of a cold investigation. The twins' parents, Michael and Sarah Edwards, refused to accept the growing silence. Every weekend, they drove from Oxford to Stonehenge, placing fresh flowers near the stones where their daughters were last seen. They distributed flyers, maintained a dedicated phone line, and spent their savings on private investigators who inevitably reached the same dead ends as the police. At Oxford, the twins' absence cast a long shadow over the archaeology department. Professor Margaret Wilson left their shared desk untouched, their carefully organized research notes becoming a silent memorial. First-year students whispered about the empty seats in the library, where Jessica and Lauren had spent countless hours studying prehistoric Britain. Inspector Helen Morrison continued to review the case file monthly, though each examination revealed nothing new. The twins' equipment, stored in the evidence room at Wiltshire Police Headquarters, gathered dust. Their cameras contained only routine photographs of stone surfaces, their notebooks filled with meticulous observations that ended abruptly on that July evening. Malcolm Green remained at his post as site supervisor, though colleagues noted he became increasingly withdrawn. He avoided speaking about the twins, and when forced to discuss that night, his accounts remained rigidly consistent, almost rehearsed. The original security protocols he had overseen were enhanced, with additional cameras and stricter access requirements. Yet these changes felt like closing a gate long after an unknown thief had passed through. Each passing year marked another round of painful anniversaries. The twins' 21st birthday came and went. Their classmates graduated, their absence conspicuous at the ceremony where they should have received first-class honors. Their parents attended, accepting honorary degrees on behalf of their daughters, their grief still raw and visible. The case file migrated from active investigations to cold cases, joining other unsolved mysteries in the Wiltshire Police Archives. Yet unlike many cold cases, the twins' disappearance continued to draw occasional attention from archaeological scholars and mystery enthusiasts. Their story became entwined with Stonehenge's ancient legends, a modern mystery among prehistoric riddles. Professor Wilson never stopped advocating for continued investigation. She published papers about the twins' research, highlighting their final observations about tool marks on the bluestones. Her efforts kept their academic contributions alive, even as hope of finding them dimmed. She maintained regular contact with Inspector Morrison, sharing any new theories or potential connections that emerged from her research. The impact on similar research programs was profound. Universities across Britain revised their protocols for student fieldwork. Solo research was banned, additional security measures became mandatory, and many sites restricted after-hours access entirely. The The twins' disappearance became a cautionary tale in archaeological field schools, their story a sobering reminder of unknown dangers. Years passed, and the case settled into a familiar pattern of annual reviews and diminishing expectations. Inspector Morrison transferred to other duties, though she kept the twins' file in her desk, reviewing it periodically. The Edwards fam. Wiley's hope never completely died, but it transformed into a quiet, persistent ache. They learned to live with unanswered questions, with birthdays marked only by memories, with 2 empty beds that would never again hold their daughters. By 2017, Stonehenge had changed. New visitor facilities, updated security systems, and modern research protocols transformed the site. Yet the mystery of the twins' disappearance remained, a persistent shadow across the ancient stones. Malcolm Green retired quietly that year, moving to a modest house near Salisbury, taking with him whatever knowledge he possessed about that summer night in 1993. No one could have predicted that the truth lay buried just beneath the surface, waiting for chance and time to reveal its dark secrets. The answers would eventually come, but not before another year passed, not before Green himself carried his guilt to the grave, and not before construction workers broke ground on a seemingly routine project that would finally bring the truth to light. In February 2018, a routine construction project on the outskirts of Salisbury would finally break open a 25-year-old mystery. Workers breaking ground for a new housing development made an unexpected discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community and reopened one of Wiltshire's most puzzling cold cases. The land, once owned by former Stonehenge supervisor Malcolm Green, had remained undeveloped since his death in 2016. As excavators began clearing the site, operator James Whitman noticed something unusual in the soil: fragments of fabric that seemed out of place in the chalky earth. Within hours, his discovery would transform into a full-scale forensic investigation. The Wiltshire Police Forensics team worked methodically through wind and rain, gradually uncovering 2 sets of human remains. The location, depth, and positioning suggested deliberate burial. Personal effects found with the bodies, including fragments of Oxford University student identification cards and distinctive matching necklaces, immediately connected the discovery to the missing Edwards twins. DNA analysis confirmed what many had already suspected. After 25 years, Jessica and Lauren Edwards had finally been found, buried 6 feet beneath what had once been Malcolm Green's private garden. The twins' parents, who had never given up hope of finding their daughters, received the news with a complex mixture of grief and relief. The preservation of evidence proved remarkable. The chalky soil had protected items that would become crucial to the investigation: scraps of the twins' clothing, their jewelry, and most significantly, a waterproof research notebook that had survived decades underground. The notebook's final entry contained hurried notes about unauthorized nocturnal activities at Stonehenge, abruptly ending mid-sentence. Inspector Helen Morrison, though nearing retirement, immediately returned to lead the investigation. The location of the remains raised disturbing questions about Malcolm Green's involvement, questions that could no longer be answered directly, as Green had taken his secrets to the grave 2 years earlier. However, the physical evidence began telling its own story. Forensic analysis revealed that both twins had suffered severe head trauma, consistent with being struck by a heavy object. The manner of burial suggested a single perpetrator working alone, taking time to conceal the evidence carefully. The depth and precision of the grave indicated planning rather than panic, hinting at a calculated response to an unexpected threat. The discovery sparked intense media interest, with journalists descending on Salisbury from across Britain. Many had covered the original disappearance, and now returned to report on its tragic resolution. The story captured public attention anew, with many wondering how the twins' remains could have lain undiscovered for so long, literally in their killer's backyard. Professor Margaret Wilson, now retired from Oxford, provided crucial context about the twins' final research project. Their notes had shown increasing interest in after-hours access to Stonehenge, particularly regarding unauthorized visitors. The discovery of their remains on Green's property suddenly cast these innocent academic inquiries in a sinister new light. As forensic teams continued their meticulous work, more evidence emerged. Soil analysis showed the grave had been dug the same night the twins disappeared. Trace evidence suggested the bodies had been transported in the trunk of a vehicle, likely Green's own car, which he had kept until his death. Each new detail added weight to the growing certainty about his involvement. The investigation expanded to include a thorough search of Green's house, which had remained largely untouched since his death. In his cluttered study, investigators found filing cabinets full of Stonehenge records, financial documents, and personal journals. These papers would soon reveal the full scope of Green's crimes, providing answers to questions that had haunted the case for 25 years. For the Edwards family, the discovery brought a bittersweet closure. They could finally lay their daughters to rest properly, but the knowledge that their killer had lived freely for decades, taking his guilt to the grave, added a cruel dimension to their long-sustained grief. The ancient stones of Stonehenge, which had drawn Jessica and Lauren to their fate, now cast longer shadows across the Salisbury Plain, their mysteries intertwined with a modern tragedy finally brought to light. The discovery of the twins' remains transformed a cold case into an urgent modern investigation. Inspector Helen Morrison, though just months from retirement, approached the new evidence with renewed vigor, determined to finally uncover the truth that had eluded her team for 25 years. The forensics laboratory in Salisbury became a hub of constant activity. Modern DNA analysis techniques, unavailable in 1993, revealed microscopic details about the twins' final hours. Soil samples from their clothing contained traces of chalk dust, consistent with Stonehenge's stones, but also unusual organic compounds that suggested exposure to burning materials, possibly ritual incense. Morrison's team meticulously cataloged the contents of Malcolm Green's house. Financial records revealed suspicious deposits to his personal accounts throughout his tenure, as site supervisor, regular payments far exceeding his salary. The amounts, usually in cash, corresponded with specific dates when the monument was officially closed for maintenance. Bank statements showed transfers from offshore accounts linked to wealthy individuals, many connected to various occult organizations. These payments often coincided with the full moon or significant astronomical events. A pattern emerged. Green had been selling secret access to Stonehenge, allowing private ceremonies away from public scrutiny and official oversight. Professor Wilson's review of the twins' recovered notebook provided crucial context. Jessica and Lauren had noticed inconsistencies in the stone circle's maintenance records. Their final entries documented unusual wear patterns that didn't match official visitor traffic, and references to candle wax and other ritual materials found during their research. Interviews with former Stonehenge security staff revealed that Green had regularly dismissed night shift workers early, claiming budget constraints. He often volunteered to lock up alone, especially on astronomically significant dates. David Parker, now retired, admitted he had sometimes questioned Green's solitary evenings, but had been afraid to challenge his supervisor. Morrison's team tracked down members of several occult groups known to be interested in Stonehenge. While many refused to speak, some confirmed paying substantial sums for private access to the stone circle. These secret ceremonies had been happening for years before the twins' death and continued long after, generating significant income for Green. The investigation revealed a complex operation spanning decades. Green had manipulated security schedules, falsified maintenance records, and used his position to facilitate unauthorized access to one of Britain's most protected monuments. The twins' accidental discovery of his scheme had threatened to expose everything he had built. Forensic accountants traced more than £2 million through Green's various accounts over 20 years. The money had funded his modest but comfortable lifestyle, with significant sums invested in the property where he had buried his victims. He had literally built his retirement on the grave of his secrets. The most damning evidence came from Green's meticulous record-keeping. His personal files contained detailed logs of every illegal ceremony, complete with payments received, and participants' initials. The twins' death marked a clear turning point in his records. Entries before that night were casual, almost boastful. Afterward, they became obsessively detailed, as if documenting everything was a way to maintain control over his growing guilt. Each new piece of evidence revealed how thoroughly Green had corrupted Stonehenge's security systems. He had exploited his position not just for profit, but to maintain power over one of archaeology's most sacred sites. The twins, with their keen observational skills and academic integrity, had represented a threat he couldn't allow to exist. As Morrison compiled the case file, the full tragedy of the twins' death became clear. Two brilliant young archaeologists, dedicated to understanding and preserving history, had been murdered by a man whose greed had led him to repeatedly desecrate the very monument he was meant to protect. Their deaths had allowed his scheme to continue for another quarter century, ending only with his own passing. The investigation concluded with a bitter irony. Justice would never be served in a courtroom. Malcolm Green had died peacefully in his sleep, taking his guilt to the grave. Yet his detailed records ensured that history would remember his true nature and the bright young lives he had sacrificed to protect his secrets. The most damning evidence against Malcolm Green emerged not from forensic analysis or financial records, but from his own hand. In March 2018, as investigators continued searching his residence, Detective Sarah Collins discovered a locked metal box in the attic, hidden beneath decades of household debris. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Green's neat, methodical handwriting spanning 25 years. The journal began innocently enough, with routine observations about his work at Stonehenge. But by 1991, the entries shifted, detailing his first tentative steps into corruption. A wealthy American collector had offered him £5,000 for a private midnight ceremony at the Stone Circle. That single decision sparked what would become a lucrative enterprise. Green documented everything with chilling precision. Names, dates, amounts paid, and specific requests filled page after page. Some clients wanted solitary meditation among the ancient stones. Others brought groups for elaborate rituals, burning incense and chanting beneath the moon. Each entry included the amount collected, usually in cash, always substantial. The most disturbing passages began on July 8, 1993. Green wrote about noticing Jessica and Lauren Edwards photographing unusual wear patterns on the stone's surfaces. He described watching them compare these marks to official visitor logs, noting discrepancies. That evening, he overheard them discussing the need to report their findings to English heritage authorities. His writing grew frantic as he recounted following the twins through the Stone Circle. They had confronted him with their evidence photographs of candle wax, scattered ritual objects, and unauthorized tool marks. Lauren had threatened to expose everything. Jessica had already drafted an email to Professor Wilson. Green described the murder with the same clinical detail he had applied to his financial records. A heavy torch, 2 quick blows. The twins had never seen it coming. He wrote about the hours spent digging in his garden, about burning their phones and personal effects, about planting false evidence suggesting they had left the site voluntarily. The journal entries following that night revealed a man haunted by his actions, but unwilling to surrender his profitable enterprise. He documented each anniversary of the twins' disappearance, noting media coverage and police activity. He wrote about watching their parents place flowers at Stonehenge, about attending memorial services at Oxford, all while carrying his terrible secret. Year after year, Green continued selling access to Stonehenge. The journal showed his prices increasing, his client list growing more exclusive. He used the twins' death as leverage, warning customers that discovery would have severe consequences. His guilt became a tool for ensuring silence. The final entries, written months before his death, showed no remorse. Instead, they revealed pride in his scheme's longevity and his ability to evade detection. His last written words discussed plans for transferring his operation to a successor, Th. Death intervened before he could implement them. Inspector Morrison read the journal over 3 days, each page adding weight to the evidence against a man who could no longer face justice. The detailed confession answered every question about the twins' fate, while raising disturbing new ones about the vulnerability of historical sites to systematic exploitation. Green's journal provided a complete timeline of corruption, murder, and deception. It revealed how one man's greed had not only ended 2 promising young lives, but had also violated one of Britain's most sacred monuments for personal gain. The writings ensured that history would remember Malcolm Green not as a dedicated site supervisor, but as a calculating killer who had betrayed everything his position was meant to protect. The journal's discovery marked the final piece in a 25-year puzzle. Its pages told a story of opportunity twisted into tragedy, of ancient stones witnessed to modern crimes, and of 2 bright young women whose dedication to archaeological truth had cost them everything. In death, through the very words of their killer, Jessica and Lauren Edwards had finally exposed the corruption they had died trying to reveal. In the autumn of 2018, Stonehenge stood unchanged by time, its ancient stones still reaching toward the sky, but the ground beneath them had shifted forever. The discovery of Malcolm Green's journal sent shockwaves through Britain's archaeological community, forcing a complete reevaluation of how heritage sites were protected and managed. English Heritage, the organization responsible for Stonehenge's preservation, implemented sweeping reforms. Security systems were completely overhauled, with multiple layers of verification required for after-hours access. Every visit, no matter how brief, now required at least 3 staff members present. Digital monitoring systems tracked all movement within the stone circle, with real-time feeds monitored from multiple locations. The Edwards family finally held a proper funeral for Jessica and Lauren in October 2018, 25 years after their disappearance. The ceremony at Oxford's University Church drew hundreds of mourners, including former classmates, professors, and investigators who had never forgotten the twins. Professor Margaret Wilson delivered a moving eulogy, speaking not of their tragic end, but of their brilliant potential and dedication to archaeological truth. Oxford University established the Edwards Memorial Scholarship in their honor, awarded annually to twins studying archaeology. The first recipients, sisters from Cardiff, carried forward the legacy of academic excellence that Jessica and Lauren had embodied. Their photographs now hung in the archaeology department's main hall, a reminder of the price of truth and the importance of academic integrity. Inspector Helen Morrison retired shortly after closing the case, but her final report became required reading at police academies across Britain. The investigation highlighted the crucial intersection of historical preservation and modern security, leading to new protocols for protecting heritage sites. Her detailed analysis of Green's methods helped identify similar vulnerabilities at other historical monuments. The impact on Stonehenge's management extended far beyond security measures. English Heritage established an independent oversight committee, including archaeologists, security experts, and public representatives. Every access request, every research proposal, and every maintenance schedule faced rigorous review. The organization's commitment to transparency became a model for heritage site management worldwide. David Parker, the former security officer who had discovered the twins' abandoned equipment, worked with English Heritage to develop new emergency response protocols. His insights, colored by years of guilt over not questioning Green's behavior, helped create a system where staff members were not only encouraged, but required to report suspicious activities. The discovery of Green's profitable exploitation of Stonehenge led to a broader investigation of heritage site misuse. Similar schemes were uncovered at other historical monuments, leading to an international conversation about protecting sacred spaces from commercial exploitation. The twins' death had exposed vulnerabilities that had existed for decades, hidden beneath layers of trust and tradition. For the Archaeologica community, the resolution brought both closure and challenges. Research access to historical sites faced increased scrutiny, with new safeguards often making study more difficult. Yet most archaeologists accepted these changes as necessary, understanding that their work must balance academic freedom with site protection. Professor Wilson, in her final academic paper before retirement, wrote about the twins' legacy. Their meticulous research notes, preserved in Oxford's archives, continued to provide valuable insights into Stonehenge's preservation challenges. Their observations about unauthorized wear patterns led to better monitoring of stone surface degradation, contributing to the monument's conservation even after their deaths. The Salisbury Plain seemed quieter now, though Stonehenge's stones still drew thousands of visitors daily. Tourist guides included the twins' story in their narratives, not as a tale of tragedy, but as an example of how dedication to archaeological truth could drive positive change. Their sacrifice had transformed site protection, ensuring that future generations of researchers could safely study these ancient monuments. 25 years of mystery had ended with truth. Justice remained incomplete with Green's death, but the twins' legacy lived on in every security camera, every cross-checked access request, and every new measure protecting Britain's historical treasures. Jessica and Lauren Edwards had died defending Stonehenge's integrity, and in death, they had finally succeeded in preserving it for the future.